So much in this interview, Miranda. We're going to unpack it now with Steve Cortes, who is the founder of Veracruz TJM, and he joins us from Newsmax, New York. Steve, we thank you very much. And before we drill down into some specific claims the president made, as you read the interview in The Economist, what did you come away with?
JD, thank you for having me. What I will tell you first, what I came away with is coffee on my shirt, because I spit it out when I read some of the comments that he made particularly regarding regulation. And I don't think we pay enough attention. We talk a lot about taxes, the more sort of obvious hindrances to growth out there. I'm not sure we talk enough about stifling regulation and what a hurdle that is to growing this economy, and particularly to entrepreneurial capitalism. And he said specifically in the interview that regulation, that CEOs should stop whining about regulation, that part of their job is dealing with regulation. Well, I would submit that the real job of a CEO is to employ people, is to create products and services that people want and need, and by growing their companies to grow this entire country. Their job should not be dealing with unnecessary, unpredictable regulation that is a chokehold from Washington.
Well, let's take a look now at what the president had to say and listen to some other things he said during that interview. You talked about regulation, but there was another R word, Republicans, and their take on economics. Here's what the president had to say.
There is no doubt that a thread has emerged in the Republican Party of anti-globalization that runs contrary to the party's traditional support for free trade. How the Export-Import Bank and OPEC became targets for Tea Party wrath is a little strange to me.
Well, I'd be happy to explain that to the president, but that's why we have you here to get your take on it, Steve. What's so strange about having concerns about OPEC?
Right. No, and JD, this is just another example of sort of his twisted logic, and the president, unfortunately, and he's done this for years, and sadly, I think he's going to for the rest of his term. He continues to want to turn it into a two Americas story. He continues to play this class warfare, this envy card, and it's really beneath the dignity of the office of the presidency. But listen, in terms of the specifics of what he mentions here, OPEC is a cartel that often is directly at odds with American interests in the world. Thankfully, we're producing so much energy here in spite of the federal government, by the way. He tried to take credit in that same interview for the energy revolution. The energy revolution, the shale and fracking revolution, has happened in spite of Washington, not because of Washington. And thankfully, we have some states, North Dakota, Texas, Pennsylvania, that are far more free market oriented than is Washington. So OPEC is becoming less significant to us. But I'd like to also mention the other group, or the other agency he mentioned there, the Export-Import Bank. That being pro-Ex-Im Bank is not necessarily being pro-free trade. The problem that a lot of folks, including myself, have with the Export-Import Bank is that it is emblematic of crony capitalism. And that is not really capitalism at all. But too often this administration, and I would argue, by the way, George W. Bush's administration, too often pursued a kind of capitalism that favored entrenched interests. And so is the Export-Import Bank, is it fantastic for General Electric and for Boeing? Yes, it is. But does it really benefit the totality of American capitalism, particularly entrepreneurs? No, it doesn't. I run a small firm. I pay taxes into that bank, but I get absolutely no benefit. That is cronyism at its worst, and I think the American people are starting to understand that, and that's why there's opposition to those kinds of agencies. There's not opposition to free trade. I think that is still a pillar of the Republican Party and will remain so. Support in general of free markets and free trade.
Well, Steve, I hope you're not drinking any coffee right now, but you mentioned the president taking credit. Well, the president was also quick to praise himself. Take a listen to what he had to say right here.
Complain about regulation. That's their job. Let's look at the track record. Let's look at the facts. Since I have come into office, there is almost no economic metric by which you couldn't say that the U.S. economy is better and that corporate bottom lines are better. None.
Okay, Steve, when you drill this down by the numbers, is the president's claim really true? Because according to a recent Wall Street Journal poll, he's actually claiming that home prices, the economy's gross domestic product, and the total number of jobs and industrial production have all risen since he's taken office. Do you agree with that assessment?
Right. Well, Miranda, listen, have some things gotten better? Absolutely. But it's important to remember, too, where we were starting, right? So he came into office at an economically cataclysmic time, right? 2008 was as scary a time as anyone has seen in our lifetimes, and perhaps the worst economic period since the Great Depression. So have some things gotten better? Absolutely. But that was a very easy bar to get over. Some things, by the way, though, have gotten much worse. So is he correct that everything's better? No, absolutely not. We've seen total number of Americans on food stamps practically double. There are almost 50 million Americans, about 1 in 6, on food stamps. I think that is a tragedy, and it's one that has exacerbated and gotten worse during his presidency. And
what about median family incomes? You were just getting ready to say that, I think.
Thank you. Yeah.
Right.
Took the words out of my mouth. Median real family income is actually going down. So what we have seen is, and I think we're going to see this in the coming midterm elections, the Democrats and the president are going to be quick to take credit for stock market gains. And the stock market is doing fantastically, right? We're just off of all-time highs. But in many ways, I think that is driven by quantitative easing, by monetary policy from the Federal Reserve.
And quantitative easing, Steve,
Steve,
that's a fancy way, quantitative easing, just saying printing money with really nothing to back it up. We're going to have to end it there. Steve Cortes, we appreciate your insights and analysis. We'll have you back real soon, okay?
Thank you.
Steve Cortes checking in from Newsmax, New York. Don't go away. There's more straight ahead.